So it's lesson 9, part 2. We've been able to add an item successfully to our shopping cart, but we've done this in a way that's not really going to serve us in the long run because we've hard-coded a customer ID. So what we need to do instead is we're going to need to write a function that's going to have to consider the 3 different possibilities so we can tie each shopping cart to a unique user. So I'm underneath my add to cart method, we're going to write a private method that just returns a string, get customer ID. So there are 3 possibilities here. We're going to use a session object to store the customer ID, and that way we can attach the cart to the customer. So there's 3 scenarios here. The scenario 1, user already has items in their cart, so just use the existing session var. That's one scenario. Scenario 2, user has no existing cart, but they are logged in. And then the last scenario, user has no existing cart and is not logged in. And so we need to take care of all 3 of these scenarios. The first scenario is probably the simplest. So first we're going to check if we're going to use the HTTP context class in .NET Core, because this is where we find the session object. And it has a method called getString. So this will allow us to look for a session variable called customer ID. So if we've already there's already something in their cart, we've already set a session variable. So we don't need to set it again. We can just read it. And yes, I'm aware this method it's giving us errors. We just need to make a reference here. So it says in order to use the getString method, in order to read a session variable that's a string, we need a reference to Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.HTTP. So let's accept that reference. That'll clear up my 2 errors here. So now we'll wrap scenario 2 and 3 in the else. So this scenario 1, the user already has items in their cart. We've already created an identifier for their cart, so we'll just send that existing identifier back. Scenario 2 and 3, they're going to happen in the else. So if there's no current shopping cart, we then need to figure out, is the user logged in, yes or no? So we can check if the user.identity is authenticated, then we're going to take their identity, their email address, and we're going to create a session variable called customer ID that's equal to it. So again, we'll use our HTTP context.session, and we're going to call setString this time. So we're creating a session variable called customer ID. and we're going to give it a value of user.identity.name. Set user's email as the session var. So now we could attach any items to their email address, but only if they've logged in. And as we discussed before the break, many people won't log in. As Tushar and Ralph explained, it's more user-friendly, it's more private to shop anonymously. So now we've got our else scenario here. So the last scenario, they have no cart, and we also don't know who they are. So again, we're going to call setString. Where could we get a unique value? There's a few ways we could do it. When they're logged in, we'll use their email address as the identifier for their cart. But what about when they're not logged in? How can we've already done this earlier in the project. We generated some kind of unique identifier. Does anybody remember where we did that and how we did it? We need to create some kind of unique value to distinguish one anonymous user from another anonymous user. Right, Tushar, we did it in the photo. Yes, we generated a unique photo name in our pets controller when we were adding a pet. So we could go and look at that. So how did we generate a unique name? You can see it on line 59. Which part of this line generates a unique value? We can repurpose some of this code for our shopping cart. What could we use from here? We don't want the whole thing. Which part of this do we want? Right, we can use the GUID class and generate a new GUID. So we can use this for our shopping cart identifier. So in this case, we don't have their email address because they haven't logged in, but we can use a GUID, and this way we can ensure that we're generating some kind of unique identifier for any anonymous user who's putting items in their cart. And then lastly, again, our method returns a string, so we're also going to have to, we're going to copy this return statement down here. So, I mean, this return statement is going to run either way. We are always going to send back some kind of customer ID. If we know their email address, that's great. If we don't know their email address, and this is a brand new cart, we'll generate a unique identifier. And then if they put another pet in their cart, well, the next time they hit add to cart, we'll just use the existing session variable. So create new unique value to write to session var. So what we'll do now in our add to cart method, we're going to replace where we've hard coded in that value of, random customer or some customer. We're going to call this method instead. And this method will work through the logic to identify their shopping cart. So I'm going to replace that, and then I want to try adding to cart in two different browsers. In one browser, I'm going to be logged in, and I'll want to check that it's using my email address. The other browser, I'll shop anonymously, and I'll check that when I put my first item in the cart, it's going to use some GUID instead. So I'm going to replace this hard-coded value in my customer ID. I'm going to change that to say, we're going to call our method instead. And our method returns a string, so we'll use that string instead. I'm going to save those changes. And I'm going to try this out, again, two different scenarios. First, I'm going to try as an anonymous user, then I'm going to try as an authenticated user. So I'm going to go to shop again. I'm going to put this pet in my cart, and we get this. Session has not been configured. So this is by design. There's actually nothing wrong with the code we've written here, but by default, session support is disabled in .NET Core projects. The reason is using session variables, it uses overhead, it uses server resources to write those variables and then have them persist as the user navigates around. So by default, sessions are turned off. So we can turn them on for our application in our startup file. So we need to go to our startup file, and we'll need to add a couple of lines of code here to enable session support. The first one is going to go inside our configure services method. We'll just call services.add session. We also need to enable it in the configure method down below. In configure services, it doesn't really matter where we put this line. It could go anywhere in this method and it will work. Should work. We'll confirm. But in our configure method down below, it actually does matter where we enable the session support. So I'm going to jump down to the configure method. And we want this to go before our routing and endpoints. So I'll just put it again up at the top. We're going to call app.useSession in here. So now our application should be set up to read and write session variables. So I will go and try again. So it took me to cart. And now if I look in the database, we can see I got this long kind of GUID, starts with 791. So if I'm in Firefox in my same browser, I add another pet, it should now give me that same identifier. because it's the same browser session. So it knows that both of these items are now in the same shopping cart. So that's the behavior we want. I'm going to try going to Chrome and adding something to the cart. In this case, I should have a different customer ID because my Firefox session won't transfer over to Chrome. So let me bring my Chrome browser into view. I'm now going to shop. That's fine. The page can't be found. But now I get a different customer ID in a separate browser. Because I'm anonymous, doesn't know who I am. So there's no way to transfer the cart between those two different browsers. But within an existing browser session, but this is session-based. If I close Chrome and reopen it, I should get a new session again. I'll actually try that. Close Chrome, open it back up, shop, add to cart, and notice, so here's my first Chrome session, but once I closed the browser, that session got destroyed. And it will generate a new session for me again, uniquely each time. So our logic as an anonymous user, this seems to be working. It generates a unique identifier, and as long as our session stays active, we can put multiple items and they'll be in the same shopping cart. We also want to try the scenario where the user's logged in, because we've coded that one as well. So I'll open up a third browser here. I'll go to Edge. This time I'm going to log in first. I'll log in with my customer account. And now when I add to cart, instead of using a GUID, it's now attached to my email address. And so we've accounted for all three scenarios. I'm logged in and I put something in my cart, it'll use my email. I'm not logged in and my cart is empty, it will generate a customer ID for me. In the third scenario, I'm anonymous, but I already have an existing item in my cart. When I put a new item in, it will attach it to the same session. So I think our logic is sound. And we've enabled session support both in the configure and configure services methods. I'm going to actually upload to Git now, just so that you've got access. So we've got determined customer for each cart. So I'm going to push. So we can now add items to our cart successfully, and we have a way of identifying and distinguishing one shopping cart from another one, even if our users are not logged in. We can use the GUID class and the session object to help us manage this. So one user in one browser session, we can group the items in their cart together, and those items will be separate from everybody else. We're also going to need this value. We're going to need the session variable on our next page when we go to show the user their cart. Because if Matthew puts item in his cart and I click on my cart page, I should not see Matthew's items. So each user needs a way to only see the items in their own carts and no one else's. So for our next act, we're going to build the cart method and view. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. Any questions or anything you want to review before we move into the cart method and view?
Oh, I've noticed that my price has a red underline on the saved cart items table. On the cart item, its price equals the lowercase price, and the lowercase price has a red underline.
Okay. Then make sure you probably used a capital P here when you declared the variable. And if so, they have to match, right? I've declared my variable here that I've highlighted in lowercase.
They're both lowercase.
Okay, so put your mouse over the word that's underlined, and it should tell you what the error says.
It cannot implicitly convert type decimal to int. An explicit conversion exists. Are you missing a cast?
Okay, so put your mouse over the price with a capital P. Does it say decimal or int?
Int. Oh yeah, it's not a decimal, it's an int.
So that means in your pet model, you probably declared the price as an int instead.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, it's okay if you've got it as an int, Chris. You don't have to change it. You can leave it as an int, but there will be a code hint telling you to do a cast. So accept that code hint, and it will convert the decimal to an int for you. That should make your error go away.
Okay, thank you.
It's not a big problem if you've set it as an int for now.
Okay.
All right, that should solve your issue.
Thank you.
So we want to now build our our method and view. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of the controller, and we're going to write I didn't declare a URL here because there isn't one. This is just a logic function. This isn't something that's called based on a URL. It gets invoked inside of our add to cart method. So it will return an iAction result, and the method will be called cart. There are no parameters in this method. So we need to determine the customer ID of this cart. We need to fetch the items in this cart from the DB. And then we want to display the cart items in a view in the browser. So these are the three things that have to happen here. We're going to query the database in the second step. We're going to return a view and pass it some data in the third step. But first, we don't want to show all of the items in the cart items table, right? We have to base it on the correct customer ID. So everyone's cart is unique and visible only to themselves and not to anybody else. So I'll create a local variable called customer ID. And to figure this out, we'll call our get customer ID method. So we're using this method again. So now we want to get the list of items in the cart, but only for the current customer. We don't want to see everybody's shopping cart. And then we're just going to return a view, pass it our query results. So not too complex. So save that change. So there's the coding end of getting the cart. Now we need to build the view. So I'll right click my method name. I'll choose add view. Again, I think we'll just code it from scratch. We could scaffold a whole list view, but it's going to have lots of stuff we don't really need. So it's probably more work and more confusing to remove a whole bunch of things than just to start with a clean slate and just add the HTML that we need. So I'm going to pick empty view. I think that'll be a little simpler. And the name will be cart with a capital C. It matches the method name on line 98. We'll create a model that's IEnumerable. Yep, Colton, I will. 1 second. I will go back to it, no problem. So in this case, the model class is the cart item. Right? This page is going to display a list of cart items. So we're using IEnumerable. We should start to be familiar with IEnumerable by now. We've used it enough times. What are we enumerating? What's our list of? Well, it's a list of cart item objects. Yeah, I'm going to flip back to the controller for a minute. We'll just save this. So figure out whose cart this is, query the cart items table, and filter for this customer only. So this customer only sees their shopping cart. They can't see anyone else's. And then load the view called cart and say, here you go, here's the list of items that should be displayed. Well, maybe just give me a thumbs up or let me know when you're good. Okay. So we'll set a title in the view data. We'll just say your cart. So we can create a table with some basic headings, and then we can use a loop to display a row, a new row for each pet that's in the cart. I'll use my usual classes. So we'll have maybe the pet. For starters, let's show the pet name. And we'll show the pet price. We'll just keep it simple first. We'll add on a little bit more. Oh, maybe we want the pet, we want the age. So that'll be our header. And then inside of our body, we can use a loop where we can display each pet I guess we're looping through cart items. So we'll create a new row. So we want to display the name, the age, and the price. So we want to display the pet name, the pet age, and then the price is directly in the cart item itself. So we'll add on to this a little later, but let's start here. Just the pet name, pet age, pet price. We'll have to add the remove from cart. We'll want to add the thumbnail of the image as well, but maybe we'll start here. Let's see how this looks. So I'm going to shop. Aha, crashes. How come this crashes? So it says, cannot find my cart item.pet.name. Why would this be crashing? I'll give you a hint. Let's say for the moment, I take out the pet name and pet age. This is actually going to work. If I'm only showing the price, go back here. My price shows up, how come I can access the price, but when I had pet name and pet age, how come it can access price but not the pet info? You're right, Tushar. Remember, our model is the cart items only. If we look in the cart items table, it has the pet ID, it's got the foreign key, but it doesn't have the other information from the pets table. So we need to modify the query a little bit in our cart method in the controller, because this is only querying the cart items. We also we can see every cart item, right? It has a parent. So we need to like do a join. So not only are we getting the cart items, but we're also getting the parent object. So this is simple enough. So we're going to call include. Right? We want to include the parent object. Include pet parent objects. So I'm going to add this into my query. So it's going to join to the pets table. Now, when you do this, you get an error. No problem. We just need, as usual, to add a reference. So the include function, it's not here. It's not available to us by default. the where function was. We used where, no problem. I tried to use include the same way. But if in order to use include, we've got to make a reference to the Microsoft Entity Framework Core library. So the include function is available, but it's in this other dependency. So if I add that reference to Microsoft Entity Framework Core, this will now do a join for us. So not only will it get the cart items, but it's going to also link in the related pet data. Give it another try. So now if I put something in the cart, right, now I can see all the info. I get the pet name and the pet age from the pets table, and I get the price from the cart items table. You may need to do this in your assignment when you're displaying data. You may also want to include parent or child data. So we can use this include function. This will do it. This will join two tables together. But you'll just need to then add the suggested reference to Entity Framework Core in order to use that include function. So it's now displaying our cart. Now notice every time I save a change and it rebuilds my solution, my cart gets wiped out because that session variable is going to get destroyed anytime the application restarts. The benefit of shopping when we're logged in, however, is the cart actually persists. If I close Edge and come back to it, a moment, I'll log back in. And my cart's still here, even though I closed my browser. So when you shop, when we're logged in, right now I can put something else in the cart. I can log out, close my browser, come back one more time. And again, as soon as I log in, my cart persists. So that's the benefit of shopping when we're logged in, is we can keep our cart across sessions because it's no longer tied anymore. It's now tied to our email address. So as soon as we log in, we have access to those items. As an anonymous user, we don't have any way to keep that functionality. As soon as you close your browser, the session's gone. So whatever's in your cart, it's just kind of orphaned those records. We will add our string formatting here. And then we also want the ability to remove an item from the cart with we can use a little JavaScript confirmation for that. So we'll add two more things to our cart page. We're going to wrap the price in our string.format method. So we'll use our currency format. Same that we did on our shop by category. We use the string.format. So now my cart formats dollars and cents. And then we just want to add a remove button here with a little confirmation on it. So let's add a link. Our controller will be shop. Our action will be remove from cart. We'll need to pass in the primary key of that cart item, right? So whose cart, which item in the cart are they removing? So we'll just use an ID parameter equal to our cart item ID, our primary key. So that's all in one tag. And it will just say remove. So I've now got remove links. However, if I click one of them, it calls shop remove from cart, passes in that primary key, but that method doesn't exist yet. So this behavior is expected. Right? The app doesn't, there's no instruction, there's no routing. Remove from cart, that method doesn't exist yet. We should also add a little JavaScript confirmation here in case the user clicks remove by mistake, or they're on a mobile device, they got stubby thumbs, and they tap remove either by mistake or they tap the wrong remove link. So we'll add on here an on-click handler. We're going to write a simple JavaScript, one line of JavaScript. Simple function we can call when they click remove. We want to pop up a little modal window with the message, are you sure you want to remove this? With an OK button and a cancel button. So we're going to go, we actually have a blank JavaScript file in our project template. Visual Studio created it for us. So we're going to write a confirm delete function in there. We can find it in Solution Explorer under www root and JS. We've got our site.js. So let's open that. We'll create a function called confirm delete. If you're in my PHP class last winter, we're basically reusing the exact same function that we used then. We'll call return confirm. And our message will just say, are you sure? So the confirm, it's like an alert box, except there's an OK and a cancel button. And the OK will return true, cancel will return false. So if the user clicks cancel, the link is dead, and they're not going to wind up deleting something they didn't mean to. A really simple JavaScript function for use in any kind of web project, doesn't matter what back-end kind of language. This is just front-end, good old vanilla JavaScript. Not using jQuery or anything else. So the result of this, if I go back to my cart and refresh, so now when I click remove, I get this little pop-up. Are you sure? If I click cancel, nothing happens. If I click remove again and click OK, it now calls the remove from cart method, which is going to be the last thing we're going to do today. The remove from cart method is pretty simple. I think we need 3 or 4 lines of code to delete this particular record with that ID from the cart items. And then we just want to refresh the cart page. So the user will have their cart reloaded and the item they removed should be gone. So again, there's the JavaScript function. There's our remove link that invokes, when it's clicked, it invokes our confirmation first. We've got a few more minutes just to enable this remove from cart function, and then I think we've done a lot today, so we will call it a day. I'm also realizing I'm losing my voice already. So we're going to write this remove from cart method in the shop controller. Also going to be a get method. And it's going to take one integer parameter. So it accepts a parameter called ID. That's an integer. So you're going to use the find method of our DB set. We're looking up one record based on the primary key value. Then we'll delete from cart items table and refresh cart page. So we'll take our cart items DB set. We're going to call remove on this item. And then we're going to commit that deletion in the database. Oops, sorry, we just call save changes. So whenever we commit any kind of transaction to the database, that save changes actually executes it. So up here in add to cart, right, we're adding a new item, and then we call save changes. Here we're doing the opposite. We are removing an object, and again, calling save changes. So again, we are going to redirect to the cart page. So there is no remove from cart view, just like we didn't have an add to cart view. These are just processes that run in our controller. They're logic operations that interact with the database, and then the redirection happens so the user goes to the cart page next. So reload my cart again. And now if I remove something and click OK, my browser just kind of flashes for a minute and the item's gone. And so we can now add to cart, we can view our cart, we can remove from the cart. So where we want to go with this next week is on our cart page, we're going to want to show a total value. And we're going to add a few other options here. We're going to add a keep shopping button that will basically bring the user back here. We'll also add a checkout button. Once the user clicks checkout, if they're not logged in, they're going to have to register and log in at that point. So they can shop anonymously, but once they go to checkout, they got to identify themselves. Okay, we're not going to have guest checkout in our store. So they're going to have to log in. They're going to have to provide their address. And then we are actually going to integrate an online payment gateway. We're going to use the Stripe payment gateway. They have a free account and they have a sandbox where we can simulate sending credit card payments. And we're going to look at how do we integrate that into our store. Yeah, I think it's a useful thing. It's a very common task web developers have to do is integrate online payments. So I'd like to go through what that process looks like. And then if the payment is successful, we're going to generate an order confirmation page and also build like an order history. So when a customer logs in, they can see a list of all of their orders and click on it and see the details. And as an administrator, they're also going to be able to see a full order history in the store where all orders for all customers. So we can use scaffolding. We're going to scaffold out an orders controller with a set of views. So before next week, a few things I just want to go over your checklist. I'm going to add one thing to this. Bear with me for just a second because I want to add an item in the checklist. I'm going to put this link in the chat, but I'm also going to add it to the checklist. So let's just 2 more minutes of your time. Also just going to push to Git. So and remove. Okay, so everything we've done is on GitHub. What do you need to do for next week? There is a quiz, largely to do with using the sessions in .NET Core. You should, if you're watching this lesson later, go through, use GitHub as a reference and the lesson video to show the products in a selected category. We didn't do product details, not really necessary for our store, but add to cart, view the items in the cart, remove from cart. Assignment 3 is due next Wednesday. This was adding authentication to your second assignment. So we've long since covered that. So you have everything you need from lessons 6 and 8 about adding authentication. And I want you to go to Stripe, set up your free account. It's pretty simple. I'll just send you a confirmation email. And then we can play around in their payment gateway sandbox. If you ever need to set up for a customer a real Stripe payment system, you can actually use your account to do that. Process actual live transactions. Okay, so next week we're going to integrate Stripe Payment Gateway, and then we'll scaffold out order history, order confirmation, all that good stuff. So we'll kind of finish off the shopping process next week. Tomorrow, I have some availability, or even later this afternoon, if people need help, you can send me an email. I don't know if time's posted, but you could send me an email if you need some help later today or in the morning. Okay, are there any questions before we wrap up?